afternoon, everyone. Let's have some enthusiasm in this building. You're in a great piece of architecture. Who cannot be excited? Thanks for coming. I'm excited that you're here. My name's Rod Bigelow. I am the executive director of Crystal Bridges in the Momentary. And I am excited to welcome you to our first day of the Art and Wellness Weekend. Here we are focused on art, health, and well-being. Across Crystal Bridges, the Heartland Whole Health Institute and the new Alice L. Walton School of Medicine, we are creating a place where those three pillars do not just coexist, they inform and they elevate one another. You can see it in the art on the walls, in the programs we offer, and perhaps most powerfully, in the architecture itself. This weekend is especially meaningful as we celebrate the public opening of Awesome, the Alice Walton School of Medicine. Alice. It was a really exciting opening event, and I think Alice said herself, she was more moved than she thought she was going to be. It was a big day. It marks the continued growth of our campus at this unique intersection of art, health, and wellness. And it's a powerful reminder that the spaces we create together have the real ability to shape lives, helping people learn, heal, and connect in ways that endure. This whole weekend is made possible due to our Art and Wellness Festival sponsors, Procter & Gamble and Mercy. Please give them a hand. Their partnership helps these experiences, helps us make these experiences possible, and their support are a shared commitment of all of us and the whole person well-being philosophy. I'd also like to thank the Heartland Whole Health Institute team for their partnership in presenting all of the weekend's programming. Building design is intentional. It's meant to make you feel and feel deeply. It's intended to invite reflection, creativity, and to care for the moment you step inside. Today's conversation offers a chance to explore the ideas with architects themselves and see them more deeply. How thoughtful design can support creativity, healing, and human flourishing. We have the privilege of hearing from the visionary minds behind the architecture of this campus, and I'm excited to introduce all three of them that will be on the stage. Moshe Safdie, I heard you clapping when you saw him come in the building. He is a celebrity when we walk through the building. I can hardly get through a hallway without having someone set him aside. He is the founding partner of Safdie Architecture, a world-renowned architect, educator, and theorist. Moshe has shaped some of the most inspiring civic and cultural spaces across the globe, from Habitat 67 in Montreal to the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore. His design for Crystal Bridges established a new standard of how art and nature can coexist in harmony. In 2015, Moshe won the profession's highest honor, the coveted AIA Gold Award. Also celebrities in the area, Ati and Marlon Blackwell. They are principals of Marlon Blackwell Architects, an internationally recognized practice rooted here in Arkansas. Their award-winning work, including the design of the Heartland Whole Health Institute that we're in, is celebrated for its formal clarity, contextual sensitivity, and deep connection to place. Marlon is also a gold medal recipient of the American Institute of Architects, receiving that award in 2020. And Wesley, I'm sure you're just on the cusp of getting that award. Our newest celebrity, Wesley Walls, design principal. Yep, clap. Wesley is design principal with Polk Stanley Wilcox Architects in Little Rock, a lifelong Arkansan and leader in regional design. Wesley's work spans healthcare, education, and cultural institutions. His design for the Alice L. Walton School of Medicine. I'm just so used to saying awesome, I can hardly say awesome. His work with Awesome brings the Ozark landscape into the heart of learning and wellness, creating a model of health-centered design. Please welcome them all to the stage. Come on, y'all. You have to find your name.
Yep. This is my name.
Hopefully, can you hear me? You can't hear me. No, you can't hear me. Okay. Team's in the back working on that. Great. So today's conversation is about meeting the minds behind the designs and exploring what it means to consider these spaces fully. To ask what environments do for us, what they build, what they can explore in our life, in our everyday life. And we're going to start with a conversation that is for all of you to answer. Are you ready? They were all really nervous about before we got up here. Each of you have designed spaces that move people emotionally and physically. What first inspired you to think of architecture as a form of care for specifically focused on human well-being? Moshe, we're going to start with you. Since you're the first AI winner.
So, well-being. I remember when I started with Habitat 60 years ago almost, my slogan was "For everyone a garden." So a garden for me was the place of well-being. It goes way back to the scriptures, paradise, garden, landscape, nature. The metaphor is for being with nature, in nature, as well-being. And in Habitat, it meant everyone, not just privileged, a garden. So even though we have to build dense and high-rise, to preserve the sense of being connected with nature, with garden, with daylight, with open air. And that has persisted in all my work down the line, and there were gardens in the workspace, and there were gardens on the roofs, and there were gardens in the airports, but it's all about garden and nature.
Amazing. We're just going to go down the line. So Marlon.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I can say exactly I know when or anything, but I do remember a quote, I just mentioned it today, somebody by a Finnish philosopher, architect, Ariel Blomstedt, who said that architecture has no absolute value in and of itself. It is only the making of a stream bed. The stream is the main thing. And that always stuck with me, that architecture was really the framework for life to happen. And how we set up that frame for life to happen in the most kind of empowering and positive ways, and to me was really the goal, right? And so for us, it's really been about how we connect to place, how we build community through place, to give people a sense of belonging to a place that they recognize and yet simultaneously is somewhat unfamiliar to them, so they feel like they're discovering something new, right? So it isn't always about what they know, but we're also interrupting, try the habitual way in which people know things, and they come to this kind of state of wonder, hopefully, about where they are and where they're going. And architecture has a way to set that up, to be a kind of guide in that way, and to be soulful, right? To move the soul, just the heart and the mind and the body. So that's how we've thought about it, and the way we've tried to approach that is through thinking of place as a canvas, and architecture as the medium, and nature and public life together as the shapers of this place. And so, like Moshe was saying, how we connect to nature, both as something that is visual but also something that's felt as well, is really important in how architecture can do that. And then, of course, the ultimate medium of light, and how you use not only light, but we don't want to forget about shadows and darkness as well. And so bringing those things to bear and how, again, architecture can shape that is in some ways the way one shapes how one feels, right? And so we know that if we get it right, people will feel good. You know, that's the main thing. We just want them to feel good. So that's my 2 cents.
Ati.
I just know that if I'm in a good place or a good space or a good building, I feel good. So it's just a simple realization like that, a good building or good space has an influence on how you feel. So whenever we do our work, that's what the guiding principles, just to try to keep things simple and not have a lot of visual clutter, that kind of stuff. So just the intention, and also bring a lot of light.
Great. Wesley.
I'll build on that because I think well-being is largely influenced by our emotional state. And even as a young person, part of the reason I became an architect is because I was very aware of how impactful the space was around me, whether I felt oppressed or I felt good about a space, or whether it was light-filled or whether it was something to celebrate or something to revere. And I think maybe I'm more attuned to that than some people, but I think that impacts everybody, whether they think of it or not. And so I think it's our job as architects, when we think about wellness, is to create space, to your point, Ati, that really improves just your immediate sense of calmness and appreciation for the space that you're in. That's something that's appropriate for, particularly for a healthy environment. So I would say it's partly our sort of ethical directive to sort of create space that embodies the mission of the places that we design.
And Wesley, how do you know when you have achieved that? What's the measurement? Like, all of you have this intention, especially when you're in the design phase. How do you know when you've achieved that when the spaces are open and active?
You know, I think when the space feels disarming, you know, when you come into it and you feel sort of this relief or this relaxation, to me, that's when I feel it's appropriate. But sometimes, you know, a place is intended to bring awe or to inspire. And so I think it really depends on the space that you're in.
Marlene, you with that?
No, I was just thinking of we try to design with empathy. So we're always trying to imagine what it would be like to be the folks coming here, to be in their shoes, the people using this, the people visiting, and creating, again, I'll go back to the sense of wonder or awe into it, not through novelty or anything, but just through hopefully an intelligent use of material and intelligent use of space that's well proportioned. You know, I've never had a client say, could you give me a really ill-proportioned, out-of-scale, ill-fitting space? But yet we, as a profession, succeed in doing it quite a bit. So what we're after, finding the right harmony and proportion in spaces. And finally, the role of light and its interaction with that. And again, not that everything has to be flooded with light. In fact, I think in some ways there's too much light in buildings. Maybe we find ways to, again, introduce controlled ways of using light. But that's what we're after. And then the ultimate, if I can say, the ultimate satisfaction is walking through the lobby here and then having someone who works here come across the lobby and said, I just want to thank y'all, you know, I love coming to work. You know, I look forward to that. And I love what I do during work. No matter where I go, I feel like I could work there. I can be there. I feel calm. And so that's the real test of satisfaction, is to have the people actually use it, actually get it. You know, they understand it, but more importantly, they feel it. So, yeah.
I often tell my students that the first move to victory is to, every time they take the pen, or at this point open the computer, to become the person they're designing for. If they're doing a school, to become the student, to become faculty, to imagine themselves in the space as it is used. And that total identification with who you're designing for is halfway to victory. And if I take Christopher Bridges as a case, to me it begins with a magic hidden in a site. The site has secrets to it that if you decipher them, you start making an architecture that grows out of the site. it's how to make an architecture that belongs. And the first step is it grows out of the site as if it's a plant. It's organically rooted in it, in its in the flora and in the topography and in the culture, in every way. And light, I agree. Light is the beginning and the end of space. You experience space through light, and there's nothing like natural light with all its many variations that makes a place uplifting. And to me, again, to repeat, unison with nature and plant life as a part of the architectural experience is uplifting, and you never know if you succeeded till opening day, and you look at people's faces, and usually you smile.
We call it delight.
Delight. We obviously talk at Crystal Bridges about art and nature and the connection between the two, and we think about architecture as that aspect of art. I'm interested, you've all talked about nature being a big influence on it. How does art weigh into that with the idea of connecting art, nature, and that well-being space? Do you think about the art, or do you think about architecture as art?
Architecture is art.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole idea of curation of the experience, arrival, you know, like what you see when you're gonna arrive into the building, or even like if you're coming into the building, you're not looking at a door, for example, you're looking at the dog trot is the idea of like you're not looking at the door, you're looking at nature before you enter. It's just a few things like that. I think the whole idea of architecture as an extension of nature and looking at nature as your inspiration for what the building will end up being. So,
I mean, designing a museum, it's a given, but you're working with, you're creating spaces for the display and experiencing of art. But generally speaking, in architecture at various scales, to me the most exciting moments are when you collaborate with an artist and they develop their art together with you as you develop the building, that the art grows and develops with the building. And I've had these moments with Richard Serra, with a great piece in Toronto Airport, with Saul LeWitt, also in Toronto Airport, with Ned Kahn, who designed these wind walls that shimmer in the wind and create shade in Singapore. And these collaborations are really very rewarding and exciting. And you can see the architecture, the art and the architecture value added as they sort of sync together.
Well, this is really the first building we've gotten to do that's really has something to do with this collision of art and architecture and wellness. And we really tried to think about how, where is art positioned? How is it lit? How is it understood as part of a kind of synthesis, right, of art, nature, architecture, well-being? So, I mean, we made places that haven't been programmed for art yet, but will be. The vitrines out by the stair, trying to turn the building both working inside to outside, but outside in. So you find art on the inside, but what if you could find it on the outside embedded in the building? So the building becomes, again, this framework for which you can discover something, right? And so we anticipate that, try to design that into the building so it's integrated. And that first started with a little humble public library in Gentry, Arkansas, of turning it inside out, and they put their exhibitions in the glass and so forth. And so the idea that art is not only within, but also out, I think is another way you can find that integration. So, and again, architecture as a framework should allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I started to say the same thing about really using the exterior as really a canvas for art, like the Melancholic at the new School of Medicine. And there's this dialogue that can be had between, I think, the architecture and the art and the landscape, and I think it's been very purposeful. By the way, it's been curated around campus on all of these projects. So using the landscape as a canvas for art in relationship and dialogue with the architecture, I think is a beautiful thing that's been executed well here on campus.
I think every building should have art.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Go
it's
for it.
important to mention scale.
Yeah.
Scale is critical in terms of a sense of well-being. we can we can bunch a building up to a scale that's intimidating, spaces which are intimidating. We can break them up to give intimacy, and we control scale. It's also important to say, I think it was Aldo van Eyck, the Dutch architect, who said, there's two kinds of architecture, that which is under the trees and that which is over the trees. And a sense of well-being is much easier to achieve when you build under the trees, building 3, 4 stories high. But when you build in the dense big cities and you go higher and higher, all those elements of well-being become real challenge to achieve. And the issue of architecture today is how to maintain the sense of well-being with all the good things we're talking about when densities are higher and higher and reaching for the sky.
Interesting. Marlon, I want you to preach what you said loudly.
I just think every building should have art in it and should anticipate art. But I'm not, yes. So, I mean, someone told me, I can't say their name, but I've never seen anybody not smiling when they're around art. You know, you see people frowning when they're looking at art. No, I mean, art brings a sense of connection with the world, but connection with your own soul, right? It forces you to look inward, to reflect, to have opinions. I like it, I don't like it, or this makes me feel good. It engages you with the world. You're no longer a passive participant or spectator, say. You become more of a participant, right, when you engage with art. So I think we need to find ways to get it into the building, to become of the building, of the place, in the same way we think about architecture, right? So I would like to say architecture in the place, of the place, for the place, and at times necessarily out of place. And I think we could think of art in a similar way. And I don't know why art is only primarily in museums and things. It should be office buildings. It should be in medical places, in healthcare. That's where you need it. So.
So Moshe, going back to your conversation, your comment a minute ago, there's a psychology to this space. Tell us how you work through the psychological design of a space where you're trying to take a visitor, a participant, on a journey. How do you think about that through the design effort?
You mean while I'm designing? I wish I could explain.
Wait a minute, let me get a pen.
I think there's a process. For me, it begins with understanding the site, first of all. I always make a model of the site, a big model with whatever features, topography, trees, surrounding buildings, to really immerse myself in it. The second point is immerse yourself in the program. I mean, the program is the essence of the building, the life intended in the building. And you need to immerse yourself to understand it, because you are basically trying to create spaces for that program to become alive and thrive. There's a process by which you start thinking of materials, building systems, materials and textures, their impact on the space. Do you build in wood? Do you build in steel? Do you build concrete, etc.? And all this just builds up step by step. We make models. We still, with all the computer tools that we have, we build models, large models. We believe that we understand better the building and that the client understands the building better, even though we have all the tricks of 3D rendering. And I also walk around in my office and I say, hey, remember this? Use it, because that's already a relic in architecture.
Others have a thought about that? Or is that what you all do?
Yeah,
No, I think it's all different.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about the inside, because I know there's a lot of architect. I'm an architect too, but I also do a lot of interiors. I think about also the sense of beauty than just utility, because a lot of times as architects we're asked to like figure out a room like this has to fit 300 on a banquet if it was a banquet setting, or 800 if it was lecture setting. So once we get that, how do we get the beauty of it? So usually we try to think about what is the most beauty that we can get for the budget that we have. A lot of time people think that beauty comes after your budget, like, oh, I don't have any budget for beauty, but we try to, I mean, we made our reputation doing just garages and, you know, little additions here and there, and taking a warehouse and turning it into a church, for example. But like still, from that long 30-year practice of doing something out of nothing, how do you create beauty out of utility? So to not forget that not only that you as architects or designers, you have to make something functional, but also how can I bring some beauty into something that's functional? I know that a lot of times that's the thing that we sometimes are punished, like especially locally, I want to say, because it was like, well, you know, they like to tend to put too much into it, but we just put whatever we can fit within that budget. So I think it's very important to think about beauty in addition to the utility of the, you know, of the building.
And that's something I just want to say, yes, the Shakers had this similar concept. They said, if you're going to make something, make it useful. But if you're going to make it useful, make it beautiful. And I think that's a great concept in relative to design, that they're not inseparable or exclusive, right, in some ways. So that's, I think, really important. For our process, I was going to say whatever he said, because I didn't bring my big fat 9B today motion. But one of the things that, and I know you do this too, and I know Wesley you do too, you couldn't have not done it with what the beautiful thing you've made over there, is we come to the site. That's the first thing we do. Everything for us, the roots of ideas, both the physical ideas as well as the metaphysical, come from being in the place. And this place, for me, was constantly walking around and down into the ravine and trying to understand what it's like to walk out of the ravine. What would I see? What would be amazing to see? I'm understanding the program and all. I've got that down. It's sort of absorbed. But now it's time to make gestures. And how the gestures operate at different scales. You know, there is the scale of the site. There is the scale of the building, the room, the people. And there's the scale of the hand, the detail. And we're constantly looking at these interscalar relationships to try to find resoluteness. And that's what guides us, so that it isn't like, oh, I make a gesture, a plan, and then I make a section, and then I add details to it in materials. It's more synthetic. So when at the time you get to where you're drawing the drawings of it, everything is highly synthesized, right? It's organic in that way, rather than just layered. And I think it's a more elliptical process than a linear one. And I think that's really important to how to think about design. It's something that is more elliptical.
I think you've all touched on this, but you know, I think architecture of its own place is important to sort of. You mentioned this position of empathy, right? Put yourself in the position of the mission of the institution, and in this case, it's how do we blend art or architecture and nature and wellness very literally with the medical school. And we often try to describe our work as storytelling. We try to take the mission of an entity or an institution, and how do we share their mission and their story. And I think in this case, we took a real literal approach, right, of extending the landscape and making it part of the solution to blending nature and wellness. But it's not always literal, right? In this case, it was. But I think to do architecture well is to take a position of empathy, to put yourself in the position of those to whom you're designing for, and making sure the project can tell the story for them, right? The architecture speaks to the place and mission of the people that you work for, and that's what we try to do.
Well, Wesley, so you, in the design of Awesome, you've got to design for the purpose of the building, the program, but medical students have off-the-chart stress levels, high levels of suicide. So how did you more specifically take the approach of creating a sense of well-being for those students when you're thinking about creating this architecture around the program?
Well, you know, Alice has mentioned this a lot, that wellness often involves, you know, self-care. And so we did give a lot of thought to how can the building partner with students and with faculty to create a place where wellness can be embraced or practiced. You may have, if you've been there or you've heard us speak about this before, you know that the big gesture was that the building is an extension of the park, right? It's an extension of the Ozark landscape. It climbs out of the ground, and Part of that was to meet the objective of screening the building from the park, right? That was an objective, and that was the strategy we used. But it wasn't just about the building self-cloaking, if you will, to screen itself. But it was really, we had this idea not just about that, but about how the building can become a machine for exercise. How do we encourage people to use the building, maybe even in a tactical sort of subversive way, make it enticing where people move up and down the building, whether they're the public or whether they're students or faculty. And so the building encourages you to climb it, right? And we draw people up through landscape and through water features, and we just make it a part of the experience of the students and faculty so that the building sort of embodies this idea of it's not just physical exercise, but just the decompression of experiencing nature, the idea of prospect, of climbing to the top, taking an assessment of your place in the world and of nature. And so that was the strategy we used there.
Marlon Ati, let's think about this building, and a lot of the work that you do actually references the ecology of this space and the history of the geography and the history of the space that you're creating. And how do you think about incorporating that into the idea of well-being and sort of this idea of human flourishing? Is that related? Abstract question.
Okay. Well, absolutely. I mean, again, it goes back to we're always looking for work that it can simultaneously respond to the local things that people are familiar with, but we like to toggle back and forth between what is local, what is global, and what is universal. And so the idea in some ways is to bring the world to you, but also to bring you to the world in a way. And so I think that's very important for us to create this kind of productive tension between those things. If we only just focused on the local and local typologies and things, we probably would make things that are fairly quaint and that you've seen before. But if we're also understanding a more universal set of principles or issues for how to build, then we can combine those things and make something really, truly of its place, but maybe slightly out of place. And that, I think, can connect with people. It's like they discover something in the way you discover a piece of art, but they also are familiar, they feel grounded in some ways. So the way this building was conceived as an extension of the karst topography of the Ozarks, the limestone, we used the local building traditions of giraffe stone. Everybody's seen that if you've been in the Ozarks, of how they, our cash crop is rocks. So we, you take the rocks and we put them up, and they would make the big grout joints because they weren't masons and they didn't know how to shape the rocks, and they made these beautiful buildings with just what they found. But most of those buildings were brown, so we said, well, let's take some from Oklahoma, some from down around Paris, Arkansas, mix the colors, grow the joints to where they can provide shadow as well as patterns, like texture out of pattern. That's the base, that's the foundation of the building. It's almost biblical in a way, right? Building it out of rock, as an institution. But then the forest, our hardwood forest here, the analogy here is the Brise Soleil is on the north or the east and west side. But in this case, we're using brass that's more durable material outside, but we're thinking about how we take the fins of this brass fins and chamfer them on the edges. They catch the light and the shadow, and they flicker over the course of the day. So we're trying, our ultimate goal would be to develop an architecture that's imbued with the order of change, speaking after Wright in this way. And that's a goal that we're after, and to engage people in that experience of change that's happening through the light, through the material, and then ultimately through the space.
Moshe, you have said that architecture is a moral act. What do you mean?
I think it's a moral act at many levels. And in that sense, I think architecture differentiates itself from the visual arts generally. I think that when an architect is given a responsibility of designing something, there's a responsibility to those who will live or use it or be part of their daily life. And that responsibility is to decipher what is needed, to listen to what is said is needed, not always the same. Not always the same. You're given requirements, and a lot of them are important, and that some of them could be misstated. And you know that there are requirements. For example, you're not always told, make it wonderful light, daylight. That doesn't come, works both ways. And in that respect, your acts are all under the responsibility of providing a service, is the simplest way to put it. And I don't think in the visual arts generally that's the way it is constructed, that essentially an artist we associate with expressive powers. Now, I don't say that architects don't have or don't result in expressive powers, but the moral responsibility is to respond to a need, and the need is real, and succeeding in responding to that is the test of architecture ultimately. And particularly in this day and age where there's computers and all kinds of new means of construction and a million new materials, and almost everything is possible. When everything is possible, the question is what is appropriate? And to me, that's the test of our times, to be able to respond morally to the issue at hand. And it gets more and more difficult as you get involved as an architect in the urban context, in public realm, when you design buildings that do need to respond to the public realm. So much of public realm is privatized and designed for maximal profit, but not for response to the public need in terms of diversity, in terms of access, in terms of all the things that make the public realm a great place. And so that's the moral responsibility of an architect.
Amazing. Do you think about it as an act of, you can clap, Sharon. Do you think of it as a facilitated act of mental health support? Wesley, you're shaking your head.
I'd say mental health, I'd rather say well-being, okay? Mental health is part of well-being. And to me, the most difficult things in our building is to give that sense of well-being. And think of, for example, the responsibility of designing an office building, workspace. And people spend 8 hours a day in that space. And the developer tells you, I need 30,000 square feet per floor. The bank demands 30,000 square feet per floor. And you know that 80% of the people working in that space are not going to have daylight. And they will not see the view until they go to the window once a day or something like that. And then you say to yourself, well, 30,000 square foot workspace is really inhuman, you know? It's not about well-being. And you need to either educate or resist or change. I mean, that is where architecture comes to conflict, literally to conflict with requirements that they are given usually by developers or business entities. And to me, that's where the sense of well-being, and I've given the sample of office buildings, but that's true about malls, and it's true about school design. I mean, programs you get from school boards rarely deal with the qualitative questions of what makes a wonderful place for education, for learning. You know, what are the qualities that make a school a great place? Light, view, intimate places, gathering spaces, textures, materials, all these questions that need to be filled in. And that's about well-being, a sense of feeling good about what you do and what you are.
Wesley, do you have a thought about that?
I was nodding because I thought it was a good question, not because I had a good answer. Well, I mean, I do agree. I think when we think about building and designing space, to Moshe's point about making sure that there's sort of this democratization of accessibility to everyone. And that was one of the things we thought about on the medical school was not only just sort of access to daylighting in spaces where maybe you typically wouldn't have that in a medical school, but also access to the outdoors. You know, with the rooftop park, we were very intentional about making sure that every level, really every space had access to the outside and to be able to use that space. So I think this is part of the ethic of designing and having empathy for people who use the building and making sure that sort of the aspirations that we have about the space and how it can be used is something that's equitable for everyone.
Okay, I'm looking at this if you want to say something. Yeah, I mean, I think, speaking of offices and so forth, I mean, the opportunity here, I mean, the ground floor is all public, and it's both the museum and cross-programming event space with Crystal Bridges Museum, with also with Awesome as well, that we're in, but it's also an office building up above. And how do you manifest this whole health principles? And light and view, one of the ideas was that no one should have a privileged view. Everyone should have access to that view, and you don't have to walk to a window, right? You're there. And we actually, strategy was, why does everything, all programming and office, have to be attached to the perimeter, right? So we detached all the program from the perimeter to allow everybody to flow and move easily. And actually, the institution has to support this, has to be encouraging to say, maybe you don't just have to sit at your desk all day for 8 hours. Maybe you can go follow the light, follow the shadow. So you have porches and you can work outside. You can work in a porch different times of the day. You have lounges and places where you can improvise and get with somebody to share ideas. And so that you're actually in moments of reflection, but you're somewhat nomadic in the office space. And so the building has to anticipate that. And that's something that I think Ati and I both kind of built into the DNA of this particular building. And I think that's why we get the feedback we do, that, you know, I really enjoy working here. It's calming. I can move. I don't feel a bunch of cells as cellular, but, you know, like cells. And I can. It makes it really makes me feel good. It makes me actually more productive. And I think schools are the same way. If you design them right, the kids, they're happier. They use all of the site. We should always think of a campus as one big classroom, not just the buildings. And that relationship, I think, is really important. And I think that's what's working here at the Crystal Bridges, the whole campus, right? Is what's taken into account is we're learning as much inside, but even more perhaps outside, right? And that kind of integration is really key. And finally, I just wanted to say that ultimately, this idea of access, that architecture, there has to be, no matter whether it's urban or not, there should be a fundamental civic dignity that comes from the building. And what that means is that people feel a sense of ownership in these buildings, that they have access and it's part of it. And it elevates their own experience in the world and enriches that experience just by being there. And even though they may not use the building, they are elevated by the space and just by being there. That's really key. People need that in their lives. So.
Let me add one thing to that. I think it's fascinating to note when you talk about the moral and ethic principle of design is, you know, Alice talks a lot about accessibility for everyone. And I think that maybe we all recognize how unusual it is that the public is invited onto this whole campus. This building is open to the public. Crystal Bridges is there as access for all for art. Who's ever heard of a medical school that's open to the public? Well, this one will be on Monday. Parts of the interior, the rooftop garden. I think that shows a lot about the vision that Alice has for this campus to make it equitable for everyone. So there's access for all to art and to nature and to wellness. And health, right?
That deserves an applause. I'm wondering, just briefly, if there are, in the work that you've done in your practice or you've seen others, are there collaborations, or those that you would collaborate with that accentuate the idea of wellness in your architecture practice? Have you seen that?
Yes. You mean consultants or people?
Consultants, partners,
Yeah.
artists. Moshe mentioned artists earlier.
Yes. Of course, you know, I think most importantly, I think will be the landscape architects. We really don't plan any building without them, because the placement of a building onto a site is probably the most important thing. Not only location, orientation, just, you know, understanding the site. I think it's better working with people that really understand that. It can help us. And everything else, you know, like in this building, I think somebody mentioned earlier about the acoustics. So we can have a really good acoustic with just a good acoustic material in the ceiling, or we could have something beautiful also. So, you know, just a few things here and there that are informative, lighting and how the lighting works. Inside a building, you don't really, if you don't notice light, maybe it's better because then it's less visual clutter, how the light integrated in the ceiling. It's just little things like that. People that have the same understanding or preference to how you design and how to make, the prioritizing the design of the building, that we all can come together and have the same kind of idea about how things can be integrated. I think it's really important.
That's great.
I was just going to say, other architects, and I know that's kind of counterintuitive, but when you're working on a campus, we're currently doing a wellness retreat, a 500-acre wellness retreat in Shenandoah Valley. Several architects, the campus is the place, right? But we divide up the buildings, and we seek resonance between the buildings. In a strange way, whether you know it or not, Moshe, we're collaborating with you in some ways, because what you built first, we're trying to find resonance with, right? So that's a form of collaboration, right? We're not out on our own, kind of, like wild-eyed, just doing whatever we want. What the terrain, which includes buildings and landscape, what came before is really what guides us. It's a form of collaboration. I can't believe it's probably much different since you came with both of things
That's right.
happening is also a form of, that's collaboration. It's being attentive.
I would say that everything to do with the senses is where we see collaboration. So let's start with sound. I mean, every room has very particular acoustic qualities that I'm not just talking about concert halls or opera houses where sound obviously is the key to success, but workspace, any space, museum, the quality of sound, and we collaborate with acousticians who are sensitive and collaborative to tune and design the sound in a space, which has enormous impact. Lighting. Every building depends on daylight and artificial light, and the balance between them and the way light comes in, particularly to spaces that need to be lit even during the day, indirect, direct, glare. All these elements are critical to the success of the experience of the space. Textural materials. And so there's landscape, of course, and we collaborate with the same teams actually over and over because we become one big expanded team. It's almost shorthand. Even graphics and signage and all these things that make up the space itself. And finally, I want to say something about the architecture relationship to clients. And I'd like to quote Louis Sullivan, who said that there's no great buildings without a great client. And I believe, I'm not just complimenting Alice. I deeply believe that great buildings require clients that inspire and that uplift what you're trying to do, and clients who you listen to and they listen to you, and that collaboration is the key to creating buildings which resonate with wellness, I believe.
Didn't Alice say a plan without execution is only hallucination? I was, I think, following to that.
We like to say in the office, there are no bad projects. There are only bad clients. When you so it's very, you have to choose your clients very carefully, and they have to choose you very carefully. We don't have a lot of bad clients. We have great clients, as a matter of fact. But it happens on occasion. There is also the other part of the stool. We like to call the three-legged stool, which is the contractor. And it's really important to have good tradespeople, good builders, and people who are engaged with their work. In the same way that it's nothing better than having an engaged client, is also having a contractor that listens and that we can listen to as well, and it's a true collaboration. I think without the three, a great client, a really great, capable contractor, and a really great design team, you can get the best products, the best projects. And that's what's That's what we strive for. And maybe that's the ultimate collaboration right there, to make the work of the highest aspiration and see it executed as the way it was intended. So I would say that's another aspect of collaboration.
Marlon, full disclosure, Marlon designed my house. And I'm afraid to ask
Good
him
client,
whether
good client. No. No, I can't, no, it's 99% of our clients are great. So
99%.
yeah. No. You're not in the 1%. Yeah. But yeah, they were great clients. It's just
I have it on the stage.
Kind of, yeah, okay, good. You were setting you up for another one. No, it was like watching the grass grow. It was great. We worked together for a long time. Okay.
Okay, 1 minute or less for each of you. When you think about the next generation,
I'm not running for office.
when you think about the next generation of healing environments, those spaces that really promote well-being, what gives you hope?
Repeat the question.
When you think about the next generation of those who create those spaces of well-being, I'll add that part, what gives you hope in that effort?
In the next generation of designers. I think, if I am to say that I am hopeful, that this generation is more sensitive to the environment and the constraints of the environment, and the sensitivities to optimizing our relationship of the built environment to the natural environment than my generation or the generations before. I think my generation and the generation before were about conquering nature. And I think that the generation that's coming now, and I see it in the young people I work with and teach, they have a respect for nature and the fragility of nature that guides them, and that gives me optimism.
It's amazing.
Well, that was along the lines I was thinking. So I have.
You can affirm.
Yeah. Well, no, I affirm that. I teach a lot too, and I find the students. I love the idealism of the students and the optimism of the students. I think they generally are motivated by finding agency to help solve today's present day issues and problems. They really are about being the world. I think they're less concerned with fantasy. I think they instinctively know that once they leave the school, the academy, nobody's really interested in their fantasies. That in fact, they need to demonstrate a true humanity in what they do and how they deal with the environment, which I think is absolutely critical. But it's also, the environment of people, right? And so you have nature and so forth, but it's also the type of spaces. They want to connect with people. They want to address the problems of today, of society. And they're looking for it in a more sense of justice. You hear that a lot in the schools. I want it to be equitable. I want it to be fair. I want it to kind of bring everyone in. That a lot of students I talk to, they want architecture for everyone, not just for the few, but for everybody. And that's something that, again, my generation wasn't much different in some way. We were looking like, how can we make the craziest form? Or how can, it's all kind of objectified. And I think this group, they have a great sense of justice in them. The key to it, though, if I can give a caveat, but you can have all the sense of purpose in the world, but if they don't commit themselves to the language of their own discipline and understanding that, then my fear is that they have the right their motivations and purpose, but when they go to make things, it's kind of uninformed, and that could be a countermeasure to that. So it comes with a caution.
Yeah, Atin.
Yeah, I think it's similar to Marlon. I'll add that young people certainly gave us hope. They can save us. But they also have a lot, like that they are seeing, particularly here in our area. places like this, you know, school like awesome. So all the things that that's available to them, I think help give us even more hope that
Yeah,
be
exposure to
better.
other
Yeah.
great architecture,
Yeah.
for sure.
for sure.
Wesley?
You know, I would say, you know, the thing that gives me hope is our clients who now have taken a different approach than conquering the world, right? We find more and more people who are on the same page about doing equitable work, who are more sensitive about the environment, who are more willing to break the rules and rethink how things are done, right? We need renegades. We need renegade clients, right? I think architects for a long time have been interested in trying to do the right thing, do the ethical and moral thing from an environmental standpoint and from a social equality standpoint. But I'm excited to see people our clients begin to see that the same way and sort of change the direction of what gets built in this country.
Amazing. Thank you all for being part of this conversation. I would encourage you to continue the conversation between yourselves and with others. Take it to the kitchen table and have the dialogue. Thank you. Please join me in thanking all of our participants.